This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, indoctrination in American high schools. Jew hatred and rosy versions of jihad and Sharia. Backed by popular demand, Dr. Charles Jacobs, the president of Americans for Peace and Tolerance. Dr. Jacobs, what an honor to have you back on the Glazov Gang.
Well, thanks for having me, Jamie.
Thank you. Dr. Jacobs, I wanted to bring you on because, wow, you are on the front line of quite a battle in Newton, Massachusetts, and we are also all so excited and proud and grateful to you because you've scored some victories. Let's begin in the beginning. Where did the problem in Newton, Massachusetts begin?
Okay, so we all know, many people know, and are aware of the problem on the college campuses, where radical professors are abusing their podia to indoctrinate students with left-wing and radical left-wing ideas. Mostly it's anti-Israel, but it's also anti-Western, anti-American, anti-Christian, and it's pro anything on the left, and it whitewashes any oppression done in the Muslim world. So that we know about this, and we know that in particular Jewish students on campus are suffering. In fact, I just saw that Hillel, the National Jewish Campus Centers, have issued and distributed booklets about securing your safety as a Jewish student on college campuses. So we're very aware of that. We made a film about that called Hate Spaces. We're fighting that every day. What most people don't realize is that now a very similar problem, almost the same problem, is occurring in our high schools, where curriculum mills that are hostile to Israel, the West, Christianity, left-wing and Arab-funded curriculum mills are penetrating into American classrooms. And we first found this out in Newton, Massachusetts, which is a leafy Jewish suburb of Boston, where you'd never think you'd ever find in a public high school anti-Semitism. One day, about 6 years ago, a little girl, a high school girl comes home and says to her dad, "Is it true, Dad, that Jews in Israel murder Arab women in jails?" And he was very angry. He was very upset. He went to the school. He called us up. He tried to talk to the school officials. They wouldn't let him have any sort of decent conversation with them because it was, for them, a matter of academic freedom, and he just didn't like the opinions that were expressed in these books. And that was the spark that lit the fire of a 6-year fight. What happened was a group of Jewish and Christian supporters of Jews started to go to the school committee and ask about what was going on and what was going on. And we started to do some research. And they said to us when we asked them, why would you teach something that was so defamatory and dangerous and flawed and false? Jews are not killing Arab women in Israeli jails. It's just not true. And I was told by the school committee, the superintendent of schools, that this was an exercise in critical thinking. It was just, and then we found out that the book that they were teaching this from was called the Arab World Studies Notebook, which, by the way, is spread all over the country, is a Saudi-funded, Aramco-funded, Arab oil-funded endeavor. So what you have is the hand of the Saudis reaching into the American classroom across the country.
Dr. Jacobs, am I correct that Newton, Massachusetts is a heavily Jewish suburb of Boston. The Jewish administrators are actually involved here. So what we really have is heavily Jewish population, Jewish leadership, embracing a curriculum that slanders themselves.
Well, it gets worse than that. It gets worse than that. Well, here's what happened. There's a provision in federal law called Title VI, and it has to do with education funding. So if you get if you're a university and you get federal funding for educational purposes to do research, let's say, and you teach chemistry, well, you're then required, in return for that federal funding, to go out into the high schools and spread the knowledge that you have. Well, if it's chemistry, that's fine. But if it's Middle East studies, it's horrendous, because all of the Middle East studies departments in the colleges, for the most part, are rabidly anti-Israel and pro-Arab and pro-Muslim. And so that's what happened in Newton. 80 Newton school teachers went to workshops at the Harvard Center for Middle East Studies, which is also funded by Aramco and the Saudis. And these teachers were taught by a fellow who was a leader of the BDS movement in a town next to Cambridge, Somerville, Massachusetts. So they got an entire mess of a pile of anti-Israel materials with a Harvard imprimatur. So they all thought it was fine. I mean, the teachers are not bad people. They were just hoodwinked, and they're not Middle East. High school teachers are not Middle East experts. They don't know the truth. And so in addition to that one, with the Jews are killing Arab women, they gave them, for example, a worksheet with the Hamas charter. Now, Hamas is a terrorist group whose charter calls for the killing of every Jew on the planet, for Allah. Okay, but this particular Hamas charter that was given to the Newton students was whitewashed. It was a phony. It was bogus. And they ripped out of the text all of the actual text that calls for the death of Jews. And in the teacher's notes about how to teach about this, the teacher was commanded, instructed to say to the students, you see, this is not about religion. This is just a war about borders, which is obviously a lie. One more example I'll give you. They gave them a set of 4 maps. These maps purport to show that the Jews stole Arab land, little by little by little. It's a lie. I mean, they showed the map of Israel and they said it was Palestine. There was no such state as Palestine. Then they showed the West Bank and Gaza as Arab lands. Well, the West Bank and Gaza were occupied by Jordan and Egypt, right? And so on and so forth. Well, those maps were created by the Palestine Liberation Organization. And on the bottom of the original set, it said, created by some ministry in the PLO. But when the students got those maps, somehow mysteriously, that little logo on the bottom was removed. So the students were never told that these are propaganda maps by the PLO. So we caught them time and time and time with our research. And it was very hard to get our hands on the materials because they wouldn't let us have them. This is publicly paid for school materials. They wouldn't let us have them unless we issued a FOIA, a Freedom of Information or a public information request, which costs us thousands of dollars to get.
Okay, Dr. Jacobs, let's just go back for a sec. Wait a minute now. Weren't there big chapters in the high school textbooks that outlined all the Jew hatred in the Quran and the Hadith? It showed the kids about the Muhammad and how he instructed the beheading of the men of the Banu Qarazai tribe in 628. It talked about the Hadiths that talk about killed all Jews, and that the Hamas charter is actually based on Jewish texts. Wasn't there a chapter on these things?
Surely you jest. You could never get such a book inside the high school itself.
This is why I didn't become. This is why I didn't become a stand-up comedian, Dr. Jacobs. It's almost, we can't even believe that something like that would happen today, and yet that's what should be in the text. That's what should be in high school text.
Let me give you some other things that ought to be in the text. What? By the way, these texts are anti-Western, not just anti-Israel. For example, when they cover England, they talk about imperialist England. Right? When they cover America, it's about, the country was formed by the theft of Indian land, and we had slaves. All the bad parts of a lot is on the bad part. If you cover any other country that's not white, not one problematic cultural practice or behavior or event happened. So, for example, you may know that I went to Sudan to help redeem black slaves from the Arabs. And so the students in Newton High School, even though I was given an award by Coretta Scott King in Boston and the mayor of Boston for redeeming black slaves from Arabs, the students in Newton would never, ever be taught such a thing because of the mandate. Really, it's in their mind. It's not a written mandate that all other cultures are to be privileged and to be shown only in positive regard, because after all, we racist Americans must be taught to have respect for everybody else except ourselves. And that really is the overriding ideology for all of us.
Well, Dr. Jacobs, but wait, is there a chapter in these textbooks that praise Israel in terms of how gays and many women and other minorities under the Palestinian Authority in Gaza actually have to escape to Israel to save their lives? Surely Israel is credited by that for, let's say, leftist feminists and leftist gays in the West.
Well, look, so first of all, you asked about the textbooks. The textbooks are not the biggest problem, because there are people who are vetting textbooks, and there are people who are doing a pretty good job and are kind of blocking the worst of the worst. What's happened is that school teachers don't use textbooks so much as they use stuff off the internet and materials they get from these workshops that are either leftist or Arabist influenced. And so you never know what they're going to get. And in fact, all of those materials can go behind the back of high school administrators and get into the classroom. So if there ever was an article that praised Israel for being kind and just to homosexuals, there would surely be another article right next to it that called that pinkwashing. Right?
Dr. Jacobs, okay, so look, you and the other freedom fighters and people, the truth tellers, find out about what's going on in Newton, Massachusetts, in the high school. You approach these quote unquote people or this establishment, and they hide, whitewash, and resist, correct? So then what happens now?
Let me focus on the worst one. The worst one was the claim that Jews were killing Arab women. After 2 years of protest and after a huge conflagration in the Jewish newspaper, the local Jewish newspaper here, they decided to remove that one particular text, the Arab World Studies Notebook. But you know what they said? They didn't say, we made a mistake. Somebody nefarious slipped one by us, and we really are sorry. And in fact, we're going to call back all those students who we told that Jews kill Arab women, and we're going to tell them it was a mistake, and we're going to show them how, this is really an exercise in critical thinking if they did it, how Arab propaganda works. That would be wonderful. They didn't do that. They said, we're going to remove this because it's old. And they just excused themselves, and they ran away from the worst one. And we kept protesting. We went to every school board meeting. We had signs. There was a big meeting where the mayor had to come. 300 or 400 people came to City Hall about this. And the superintendent of schools was roundly booed by 300 or 400 people. And the mayor was challenged. I was the speaker, and the mayor was challenged. And then things just kept going.
One second. Dr. Jacobs, when you say we, just so our audience knows and we know who to support and to give credit to and give more support, who is we? Your organization and?
Well, actually, this whole movement was led by a 90-year-old woman named Margot Einstein, no relation to Albert, but she could be, in terms of her organizational brilliance. And she just got us angrier and angrier, and she helped us all go. My organization, Americans for Peace and Tolerance, did the original basic research on this. Americans for Peace and Tolerance. Okay. And now comes, so they said, okay, we'll take out the Arab World Studies notebook. That's just old. Okay. After a while, I gave all of my research over to a prominent scholarly research group called CAMRA, Committee for Accuracy in Middle East Reporting in America. Everybody knows who CAMRA is. It's a great organization. They got more materials from the school, and they published a 100-page booklet condemning what was going on in the schools, and that helped a lot. So once the organization CAMRA published their 100-page scholarly book, everybody knew the game was over because they validated everything that we said, and they even got more. Okay. Now comes a painful thing to say. The major Jewish organizations in Boston failed us. Just like in the campus situation, they're afraid to get involved when the issue is academic freedom. They are notoriously weak at going after college professors who use their podia to indoctrinate, and they were notoriously weak in the Newton school situation. They just didn't want to get involved. And worst of the worst, one of the school committee chairman was a relative of one of the major leaders in the Boston Jewish establishment. And in fact, what happened is that the Boston Jewish establishment, rather than stick up for or act on behalf of the Jewish interests, this was about this man's family member. And that hasn't really come out yet. I haven't said that in public yet, but it's true. And it's a scandal in the making.
Terrible stuff, Dr. Jacobs. Just, obviously this is connected to the leftist heart of darkness in general in terms of the leftist psychology. And then we have this very, very sad phenomenon of the Jewish establishment and of the leftist Jewish community and what it does to sabotage its own community in Israel. And we could discuss that for hours. But Dr. Jacobs, in many respects now, you have won in terms of this particular battle, correct? On some levels.
Let me tell you how we won. Here's how we won. This woman, Margot Einstein, organized a mass demonstration just 2 weeks ago. 400 people came out in front of the school committee demanding the firing of David Fleischman, the director of the schools, the school superintendent. And just before that meeting, we found out that the Anti-Defamation League, which was silent all throughout this, after they saw the CAMRA book that proved everything that we had said, went to the school committee, and we got a hold of a letter where the ADL thanked the school committee for completely removing all of these materials. Now, we never knew that this happened.
They secretly did it to save face, right?
They secretly and behind the scenes removed all the materials so A, they wouldn't ever have to say to anybody, we were really wrong and we messed up big time, right? And B, they wouldn't give us the grassroots movement, right, led by Margot's group and our group and other groups, that we actually won. But it took us 6 years.
Okay, now Dr. Jacobs, the lesson here, and thank you so much for everything that you're doing here. Now look, We know that the left fights culture war 24/7. The problem with conservatives on many levels is that they're busy having barbecues and living their lives. They don't engage in political battle. This is the problem with conservatives. And so in this particular case, you showed that it's not hopeless. Yes, the left has taken over. It dominates the culture. It rules academia, Hollywood, the media, etc. But you showed that a grassroots movement can achieve things against the left, right?
I think that's the lesson. The lesson is you can win if you fight, and it's going to take a long time sometimes, and it's hard, but you and the truth can win, and it's an extraordinarily important lesson. And by the way, this is happening all across the country. And another thing is, I haven't said much about other things in the anti-Jewish stuff and the anti-Israel stuff, but there's anti-Christian stuff too in this, and there's anti-American stuff. And Islam is hunky-dory. There's nothing wrong with Islam. It's the religion of peace. And they're terrified to say anything at all. And by doing that, they think they're human rights people, right? But they've abandoned the women who are subjugated under Islam. They've abandoned them. They've abandoned the black slaves. They've abandoned the entire Christian world. They've abandoned the gays under Islamic domination and subjugation. So these people with nice smiles on their face, posing as morally virtuous, are doing sinful things. And it's happening, I would guarantee you, it's almost in every school across the country. So people watching this, please go and see what your kids are learning in school. Please. And get in touch with us. Americans for Peace and Tolerance. If there's a problem, we can offer some help and some guidance, but don't let it go, because our children's minds are being poisoned.
Dr. Charles Jacobs, thank you so much for everything you're doing for the truth and defending freedom, defending Israel, America, the Judeo-Christian tradition, Western civilization, because we're really under attack. Let's just stress one more time, for all the audience members right now that are on the edge of their seats watching this, and they're saying, this Dr. Jacobs is the hero right now in our world. We want to help him. Where exactly do they go?
www.peaceandtolerance.org.
Peaceandtolerance.org.
And if you Google peace and tolerance, or if you Google my name, you'll find that I am hated by all the right people.
You're hated by all the right people. Very briefly here, I don't want to pry into too much personal stuff or stuff that's maybe private, but Dr. Jacobs, it's a given that you've also put yourself at risk. I mean, you have a lot of people that hate you, correct? Is there some danger involved? Is there something you can tell us, or we keep that private for now?
No, we don't talk about that. And, you know, one shouldn't think about that. One should just keep on fighting.
Dr. Jacobs, thank you so much for everything that you do and everything that you are. And I personally have a feeling that you're related to Einstein.
No.
Oh?
No, but I do love Margot. Margot's amazing.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Jacobs. Thank you for watching the Glazov Gang this evening. We will see you very soon. Good night.